matter of weeks, the Wuhan virus pandemic changed how students are educated around the world. Schools and universities were forced to adapt to online education almost overnight. This exposed the digital divide, making us realize that even in developed countries, internet access is often lower than we might think. Despite the challenges, the shift to e-learning also gives us a glimpse of how education could change for the better in the future. And in the midst of all of this, in India, the government approved the National Education Policy 2020. It will pave the way for sweeping changes in school and higher education sectors. It was much needed, but executing it nationwide is going to be a mammoth challenge. To discuss and understand these issues better, we at WION have organized this Education Summit. Mr. Ramesh Pokhriyal, India's Education Minister, will be giving the keynote address on the show later. For now, let's go over to our first session and hear what the experts have to say.
Much education today is monumentally ineffective. All too often, we are giving young people cut flowers when we should be teaching them to grow their own plants. This is how American public intellectual and statesman John W. Gardner summed up problems with the education system. And to a large extent, this holds true for India too. But the country is gearing up for a paradigm shift from quantity to quality in the education system. Hello and welcome. I'm Karthikeya Sharma and you're watching the WION Education Summit. In this session, we are going to talk about India's National Education Policy 2020, which has replaced a 34-year-old education policy and promises to bring about major reforms for both primary and higher education. The idea is to make education application-based and skill-oriented. While the policy has been well received by a section of the society, it has been criticized by many for not having a coherent roadmap and a clear strategy for implementation. To understand it further, I am joined by our experts. On the panel, we have with us Raghuram Ananthoj, the founder of Leading Self, an unconventional educational program that is also organizing Read India Celebration 2020. Snehal Pinto, director at WION International Group of Institutions. Naveen Chopra, founder of TC Global, a leading global education platform, and Professor Anil D. Sahasrabudhe, chairman of the All India Council for Technical Education. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And my first question is to Raghuram Ananthoj. In India, a lot of new reforms have already been announced in the National Education Policy. How do you see the future of education in India in the backdrop of the new policy which is going to be put in place now?
I think I must congratulate the government to begin with for bringing this much needed reform. It's been long due, like you said. It is a huge step forward in taking our education to the next level. Having said, we still have a long way to go. Why do I say that? Education which cannot enable independent thinking is devoid of something fundamental. So along with these structural changes, there has to be a content reform. Again, in the society, there's a widespread perception that the ability to read, write, and speak is equal to education. While education is the ability to discriminate between the real and the fake, it is the ability to differentiate between the right and the wrong. So how does that happen unless a person starts thinking independently? Therefore, I say it is this aspect of education which the government and the content should focus.
I think that's a very fair point you have made. But let me now bring in this discussion Snehal Pinto. My question to you is that foundational learning is a big challenge in the Indian education system. A large section of the 12 crore children in primary schools cannot read or understand simple text. More so, they can't even carry out basic addition and subtraction. How does the National Education Policy plan to correct this?
And I think, thank you firstly for having me on the show. And I would like to reiterate my thanks and gratefulness to the government for this document. The critical key being implementation. Considering that the public and the private schools have now been brought they're going to be looked at the same way. will the regulatory ambit for the private schools apply to the public? And with that said, will access to the primary schools be created, for primary education be created mainly just through the private players, or also will the government hold its own public schools accountable? So the critical key here is implementation, Karthikeya, according to me. We aim to have foundational numeracy and literacy achieved by 2025. Investment in teacher education is going to be key. Skilling, reskilling and upskilling of our teachers across the nation. How do you aim to do that? That is a strategy we're looking forward to. There is teacher education already laying out its framework. It's already there in the document. But how are we going to see it? It's like when rubber meets the road. How are we going to actually see it actualize? That is the thing that will actually indicate to us, are we going to be able to successfully achieve this, or how long will it take for us to achieve this? At least there are some kind of timelines mentioned in the document. So that's a good start.
Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe, this is about curriculum, because curriculum is also being redefined. So the curriculum is being reduced to core areas to increase critical thinking. How can this be done, and how will it impact students, or how will it help students?
Today, the young generation picks up the technology, picks up the information very fast, faster than probably the teachers. And that's why empowering them in terms of all these activities is significant. I would just like to give you an example of 4 years of our experience of AICTE in running Smart India Hackathon, where we took up problems from central government, state government, public sector, private sector, startups, small and medium scale industries. And when given as challenges for our students, undergrad students of second and third year, they came out with brilliant out-of-the-box solutions. And in 36-hour-long hackathon, without sleeping, they were able to give first-cut solution. May not be a perfect solution, but they are able to bring out value to what they are learning in the classrooms in terms of project or what we say problem-solving methodology. The problem was we had never given them opportunity. I think many people talk about the system being not innovative, not allowing creativity. The problem starts with our primary schools in terms of our examination papers, where emphasis has been all the time on, you mug up and come and write it in the examination, you get full marks. But if you ask them, why is it so, how is it so, or where is it going to be used, where are the applications of this, they are totally blank. I think, therefore, our examination system needs to be changed, and that is what is being talked about in this policy as well.
No, absolutely, but let me take this discussion to Mr. Naveen Chopra. Education is linked with employment and better opportunities. India has been producing degree holders but not creating enough jobs in India. In fact, Skill India was built to achieve a balance between education and employment sectors. Is the new education policy going to bridge this gap, as Skill India is yet to reach its full potential?
Well, I mean, look, the reality, if we are really take a look at the harsh reality, the absolute truth is that India has been producing a large number of graduates, but 80 to 85% of them are unemployable. They are actually unemployable because the system that's producing these graduates is itself warped. I mean, the fact is that in the old policy and in the new policy, one thread is common, and that thread is that it is still essentially a state run and a state-based subject. I mean, even the term that is used in this document is a public philanthropic enterprise. There, the government is looking at promoting. Public-private is poison. It's the poison pill in the mind of our bureaucracy and government, and perhaps in large sections of the public. But the reality of the scenario as it exists and will continue to exist is that if all of this broad brushstrokes of excellent aims, laudable aims is to be done, it's going to require not only huge dollops of money, it's going to require a huge amount of human resource that is creative, talented, readily deployable, readily available. And that, under no set of circumstances, is going to be, available to the system within the ambit of this policy, as indeed it wasn't within the ambit of the old policy. I mean, so where's the money going to come from? Now, one proposal I've personally been articulating for many years, including to many friends in the bureaucracy of government, is that any public service, including education, really speaking, should be means tested. I mean, the moment you means test and you allow private-public partnership in the truest sense of the word, you are then bringing in the wider society at play into the national paradigm that is of such huge importance. And of course, you're talking of jobs, the pace of change of technology, the introduction of artificial intelligence and digitization is not something that's going to happen in the future. It's happening now. By 2040, the scenario is going to be so far removed from what the government is talking about in this document that it will make your head swim. I mean, no 2 years are alike. Every university in the world worth its salt right now is examining how to evolve from within the old paradigm, which, if you really think about it, it was designed to produce graduates to meet the needs of First Empire, in the process of which they destroyed Indian education, of course, which was fantastic.
Absolutely.
And then the Industrial Revolution, which was part of the whole story. Now, the Industrial Revolution, we have gone far beyond that. I mean, there are fewer and fewer people required to do the jobs because it's machines and machine learning and machines, coming in. So your productions are almost all automated, or new plants coming in are almost all automated. They have even, which means the job market is shrunk in the traditional sense. Some jobs have opened up. I mean, the hard reality that was, for 3 years ago, if I remember my data, it was being said that in 5 to 6 year period, 800 odd million people would be out of work. Correct. And that was before the COVID. And instead of that, you would have about 235-40 million new jobs created, of the new techs and the new types that are happening. They're still leaving a gap of 400-500 million, 600 million.
Well, I think that's
workers
that's where
within the current demand supply.
That's where the priority of the government should be as to how to bridge the gap. Like, for example, most of the university in West, they have a relationship between the government, they have a relationship with the private sector. People go and join the government, they come back and teach. Even the examples of big politicians who had taught in university, they served as national security advisors. But yes, that's an important topic, but I'll come back to it again because there's one more element or the important pillar of this debate, which is about research. Let me go back to Mr. Raghuram, Ananthoj. He has been making an important point on research. Do you think that this national education policy is also trying to relocate research in our educational curriculum and providing the importance it should have?
I think absolutely, the government has taken a lot of measures, including at this school level where they're, doing something called SEP, where they're promoting creativity, entrepreneurship, right? So at higher education, absolutely, the government should put in a lot of money, and not just the government, but the industry has to, engage with the government and, the universities and put in the money required. Otherwise, without research, you can hardly go that distance. This is a good step, the categorization that the research intensive higher education institutions has a separate category. So those who are interested in research can pursue those. But the big thing is, how do you make the resources available? And it is only possible with the industry, joining hands. Mm-hmm. And industry must be, part of this, and they must let the education institutions know ahead of the curve that 2 to 3 years, this is the area where we're looking for, people, and these are the skill sets we are looking for, and we need research in these areas. So unless, a proper planning is made ahead of the curve, 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, unless that happens, when there's I don't see this working out. But I think...
But here, I would like to ask you, can creativity-driven programs like Read India celebration add a new dimension to the education system?
Absolutely, I think that's what we hope for. So we have to move towards a knowledge-based society. That's the whole objective of this. Unless you make students at school and college level, make them aware of what creativity is and what value it adds and why it is the only way forward. Like Rabindranath Tagore said, the future is in the ideas, right? Those who come up with the ideas, lead the way. And the famous tagline, if I remember, "Ek idea jo dunya badal de." And this is a cultural shift. We need to nurture from the school level itself. It's not like from thin air you can produce creativity. It has to start from the school and then the college and then the higher education. So there has to be that platforms at each of these levels to encourage creativity. Mm-hmm. Only that, and the key absolutely is independent thinking. So
okay.
Yeah, we must understand the difference between the belief-based society and independent thinking society. The kids must understand. Only then, the creativity is just an outcome of a culture. You cannot say,
yes.
I'll return, creativity and I'll start churning out ideas.
You have located culture in this debate, but, we will also locate language in this debate. Let me go to Snehal, Pinto. The whole national education policy is also talking about education in mother tongue. Now, if you look at the global scenario in terms of education, parents in various urban areas in India, they encourage their children to learn new languages, Spanish, Chinese, English, and now the focus on regional languages which are flourishing. They have their own rich history, literature. So how do you balance both of them? The thrust of the policy on mother tongue, but the aspiration of the families for the children to learn new global languages for employment opportunities. Your comment.
So, Karthik, one of the things, if you notice or if you read between the fine print says, there is wherever possible. All right. I learned English after about the age of 6. I learned Marathi first. And IB encourages learning in the host country language and encourages learning in your local language. So what we do need is a clarity on the 3-language policy. It says, it won't be imposed. Wherever possible, to promote it, to use it until grade 5, as well as, along with English. I'm hoping English will be now a part of the Indian languages as well, because it is a global language. But I like the fact that it is not imposing on the schools, and children, by and large, from the foundational years, learn in their mother tongue. They learn to speak the mother tongue, and I'm hoping, just like me, the local languages are enablers to learn a new language, and which they have been. And like me, there are many out there who have learned English later, but they're fluent in their local languages, they're fluent in their mother tongue.
So are you saying it's doable? You're saying it's doable?
Absolutely. But what I'm asking is for, again, the crucial key lies in how we're going to implement things. Because like one of the colleagues earlier said, it's a concurrent list. It's a state and the center thing. So if education is going to be, if the mother tongue is going to be just mandated in the state, as this is the only way to go, it's going to be difficult, because then you have, what are you going to tell the schools who are already doing so in English, who have already done a good job in there? They're also doing the local languages. Don't penalize them. Like the Honorable Education Minister said, they can learn 10 languages, in their foundational years. My only submission is, okay, will you be able to let us know or suggest to us how can we, look at the modalities of it for the foundational year, especially starting from there into the primary.
Okay, I think that's a fair point, but there's another thing which, I would like to join Mr. Chopra on this issue, because this new educational policy is also trying to create a shift between rote learning, which is mugging of the text, to more creative learning, redefining the subject, ability of the students to reinterpret the text, and also to create a space for vocational training. Now, if I look at the data, the NEP also has a target of providing vocational training to 50% of students by 2025. Sir, is it doable?
I don't think so. With the current resource base, human resource base, I don't think so. Simply for the fact that if you look at it, the number of teacher shortage that exists within the system, trained teacher shortage, and within the government or state education system, again, the attitude where you'll often have, and there's enough reporting in the press over the years on this factor, where you'll often have scenarios where teachers are not attending classrooms. They don't come to school, and children are there uneducated. Now, these are such deep-rooted system issues of high-quality teacher availability that unless that is fixed on a war path, and that I certainly don't believe that's possible without involving the wider society. The state by itself can't do it. It simply does not have the means or as a matter of fact, the funding. If you look at the current state of play,
absolutely,
or at the state of economic play in India at any time, it's a pipe dream. I'm sorry, but we build word pictures and beautiful pictures. It's a very beautiful picture that's been built. No one can question that. But the delivery mechanism simply does not exist, and the government is not prepared. No government, as a matter of fact, it's not just the current government. No government at state or national level has ever been interested in bringing in a policy framework that incorporates the wider society to help with the problems that confront the nation. There's no shortage of research. There's no shortage of money. It's just the attitude.
You're saying that, Mr. Chopra, you have made a point. You're saying that it's a pipe dream. Understandable, because ultimately vocational education will also need to be absorbed by the parents. It's not the choice of a child. The parents will also have a say, because at an age when a child is in 6th or 7th class, choices are not something which he makes individually. These are choices which he'll make with his parent. But we have been we have been talking about language, culture, located the importance of vocational training in the new educational policy. But there is also one part to it. This question I would like to take it to Mr. Raghuram.
Yes.
When we talk about employment, education, there's a traditional perspective. And our policies are accommodating the priorities of the state. If you look at the evolution of our education policy. And now we are looking at a post-industrial society where there would be a lot of robotics, where there would be artificial intelligence, loss of jobs in certain sectors. Do you think that our educational policy is gearing up towards that future where robotics and AI is going to play a very important part?
See, technology will continue to evolve, and when it evolves, it will create new opportunities. Absolutely no doubt. The jobs will go down. They will be end of life on a lot of spheres, but there will be new opportunities. Absolutely. Right? So, we can use technology, just to go back to one of the previous, comments that, it'll be difficult to have resources, people and all, but, you can have, a vocational training or whatever from one location across, using technology to, thousands of villages. All you have to do is, there's internet, you can use the village panchayat offices, if there's a will, I'm an optimistic person. I'm saying, yes, it can be done. Technology can be used for evolution, absolutely. But, technology will definitely, it all goes back to the point that how are you nurturing creativity? From school, primary, high school, middle school, you should have some periods where they say, go solve problems in the school. Little things, find a trash can or clean the things, go out onto the streets, have, 1 or 2 hours, dealing with the local issues. It has to be a cultural shift from being a part of the problem or being silent on the problem. The cultural shift should be go experiment, with finding solutions.
But if you look at, India is a very diverse society, ethnically, religiously, a lot of political views. It's not as, it's very different from the Scandinavian example. It's very different from, the way students are taught in France, UK, or even Canada. So, a lot of experts spoke about gave us a global perspective. Now, you were speaking about creativity, but how do we balance the importance of the score with the ability of teachers to groom students? Grooming is one part, but scores are also about rigor.
No, rigor has to be there. We cannot compromise on the rigor, but it's not rigor alone. That's the point, right? India is, you cannot say it has to be a global education. World is one. There's no better platform than WION. But that has to get into the school books. The thinking, are we not using the WhatsApps, the global technologies? Do you think the kids in the rural area don't know the technology? Give them the freedom, the time in the school, and they will come up. I've been spending time with the kids. There's extraordinary talent. You just give them the time and opportunities, give them some lab space, time. Don't, bog them with the academic rigor, which is not useful. But, look at math, science, whatever which, is handy, which needs to have rigor, that should have rigor. But at the same time, you should give them freedom, that space to, experiment. It cannot come, suddenly in universities. These are the same kids who are coming from these schools, where...
Absolutely rigor is important, creativity is important, but there is one fundamental element we have not spoken about, without which there cannot be any education policy, without which there cannot be any education per se, and I'm talking about teachers. Now, this new policy requires a large pool of trained teachers, and Snehal, I would like to draw your attention on this. How can this be achieved in midst of pandemic? Pandemic is a reality. Our educational sector will have to deal with it, whether it's technology, people, doing away of the good old classrooms. Teachers will play an important role. So where do we get the teachers during the time of COVID-19? That rich pool of teachers who are going to implement this new policy.
So I'm assuming that the pandemic will end at some point, which we are all looking forward to. And you got to understand, Karthikeya, we are a billion odd people. There are enough and more people who are willing to give time, who are willing to invest their lives in serving the children. What we need is we need to skill them right. We need to, give them a framework within which they own up the whole process of teaching, learning, as well as the moment you give it a professional status. You need to, what I find nowadays is the lack of respect for teachers as I see it. It's almost like, oh, you provide a professional service, so I'm going to treat you, like one. But I don't see the same kind of status accorded to a teacher as I would see to another professional. And that is something we need to bring back. It's a known fact that teachers are low paid in India. And it says in the document that needs to be restored. There's going to be higher remuneration. Well, that is all good in the public sector, in the public schools. And what we need there is higher accountability. We need to, there's a different lens used to regulate private schools. And if I can submit that, if you can use that same lens to ensure that public schools are doing well, you will find the teachers willing to come and give their time. You get the whole voucher system right. You give scholarships to the student. You get that thing right. Teachers and tied to the performance, to teacher performance, and tied to the learning outcomes, the measurement of learning being critical. That's how we are going to ensure that teacher performance is going to be primal to the learning outcomes. Okay.
Mr. Chopra, a quick comment on this issue, a very specific question. We are talking about teachers. So the issue is, who trains the teacher, and how do we buffer the teachers from the responsibility which state invests on them? Teachers are part of so many governmental drives. So, on one hand, you have teachers dedicated to education, but on the other hand, they are being deployed by the various arms of the states for various other activities which are not primarily or not education-centric at all. Quick comment from you.
Well, look, I mean, the supply of teachers through the teacher education, qualification programs like B.Ed and M.Ed and so on is one line of supply which exists. But frankly, if you look at it slightly holistically, or rather out of the box thinking, teachers are everywhere. For example, you, in a media and communication course in any school or college, could walk in and through the simple experience, modem of sharing the experience and expertise that you have acquired in your profession, you would be an effective teacher for that particular role, for that particular module, let's call it. Now, you would have to go under the present policy and get yourself a certificate of some sort before you're let into the classroom. It's bad thinking. The teachers are everywhere. All of us are in some way, shape or form able to teach some aspect of the education paradigm that is happening in our schools, and in the process make it interesting. As a matter of fact, all education institutions that bring in visiting professors at the university level, similarly visiting teachers at school level, would make the whole thing so much better and bring.
That's a very interesting point. Experts can be teachers.
And there's
Absolutely.
so many people who would be willing to.
Absolutely, experts can be teachers, and that's how you can draw the pool. But I'm falling short of time, Mr. Chopra. Really, I'm falling short of time, or else I would have accommodated all the views. So I'll just take a closing comment from Professor Sahasrabudhe, who had been very patiently waiting for his turn. A minute to you, Professor. Do you think that this policy will have a transformative impact on our children?
This is not only transformative, but it's a game-changing policy. First time, probably some of the things which are mentioned in the policy never existed before. Of course, autonomy or mother tongue or three-language formula, these were existing earlier also. But if you look at credit banking or multidisciplinary universities with a lot of multi-exit and multi-entry system possible, National Research Foundation, in terms of skilling right from class 6, whether it is AI or programming skills starting at that age itself, I think these are all game-changing things that are going to happen. And especially in the first 5 years, in the formative years, the child can very easily learn, because the language part, many people were commenting different ways. But if you look at the age of 3 to 8 or 10, people can learn as many languages. Forget 3 languages. We can learn 5 languages. There are concrete examples. Only the way we teach is going to be different and has to be different. We can't put them to start writing script and reading script, but start telling stories, make them play games in different languages. They will pick up the language, and then they will get interested in learning the script as well.
Okay, I think that's a fair point. And last question to you, Mr. Raghuram. A lot of countries have tried different programs. They have reinvented the educational program. So no child should be left behind was a major driving factor for the educational policy in the United States of America. What should be the Indian motto?
I think the primary challenge is get them to school. Education should become mandatory. How do you make it accessible to rural areas? That will be the key challenge for the government. If you can get them, how can you make it interesting? What is the playful things you can have at the school so that kids go to the school? It all has to start from the primary school. Only then, that will, the journey will start. Until you draw kids to the school from rural areas, I don't see this working out. But I think, it should not be a problem, with technology and a political will. I think this education system, like, the previous speaker mentioned, it is a game changer, absolutely no doubts. And there is a long way to go.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank all of you, everyone who has joined me today for this program on education. Thank you, everyone. I think the general consensus is that the National Education Policy 2020 is promising and was much needed. But it remains to be seen how the challenges of implementing it are surmounted. But I do believe that these reforms will shape a better future for children. With that, it's a wrap of this session. Thank you for watching.